I'm not certain yet what I want the level structure to look like. I'm ruling out an open world for a few reasons, most obviously being budget constraints. I'm also ruling out small levels. I do like the idea of small, bite-sized levels like the ones seen in games intended for portable consoles, like the levels in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, but what makes small levels unfeasible for my game is the controlling of the dragon. A small level would be too constricting to move around in. For now, I'm going to focus on creating a medium-sized environment that is big enough for both the player and dragon to move around in. The goal of this devlog isn't to create a polished level that you will someday play when the game is released, but instead is to experiment with creating a workflow that will allow me to create levels feasibly. I intend for my game to feature multiple different biomes, providing variety in the level's aesthetic and design. The first one I want to tackle is the grassy lands type biome. I created a vision board on Pinterest to help solidify the aesthetic I was going for. My main inspiration for this land is the beautiful green countryside of Ireland. Oak trees, tall grass, mossy rocks and calm rivers. I debated whether to make all the assets from scratch or whether to purchase pre-made ones. After looking around at some pre-made assets for inspiration, I found this asset pack on itch.io that captured what I was looking for perfectly. They were so perfect, in fact, that it would be pointless for me trying to recreate them myself. So, I went ahead and bought them. I have no problem with developers using pre-made assets. Every AAA developer does it. The reason AAA developers don't get called out for asset flipping though is because they purchase their assets from private marketplaces, not available to general consumers. For me, a game gets into the asset flip territory when the game consists of almost all pre-made assets with minor adjustments made to them. One thing I think indie devs should stay away from though is having the models for their main characters of their game be ones purchased from an asset store. Your main character should be unique to your game and personal. That's why I'm planning on changing my character model very soon. With the assets acquired, I now had to bring them into Unity and create prefabs out of them so they match the PS1 world. This took days to do as I had to create materials for each model, adjusting the values in the shader to make the prefab look right. For objects like trees and boulders, I attached colliders so my player could collide with them. I then created a water shader. This was simple enough. It ended up being just two textures that scroll in different directions at different speeds. I could have added depth to the water or foam at the edges, but I decided to keep it more rudimentary, as those features would look too out of place for my PSX aesthetic. For the first custom model I make for the project, I created a legally unique moondrop flower in Blender. The mesh ended up being very simple, as was the texture. I made the shader color HDR enabled and added bloom to the scene to give it that iridescent glow that makes it so beautiful. And there we have it, a gift for Yona. Now that I had the assets prepared, I could begin creating the levels. I began by experimenting with procedural world creation through a tool called Gaia. With just a few clicks, I can create an entire world with mountains, rivers and plains. I played around until I got a shape that I could work with. I played around some more but wasn't happy with the results. It really didn't lend well to the type of game I was making. To make it work, I would have had to give up some of the aesthetics I wanted to achieve, like the vertex warble. I also felt like the levels didn't feel purposefully built. I would need to design my gameplay experience around the terrain instead of the other way around. All this was a deal breaker for me. With that, I decided to move on from the procedural approach and instead move to a more handcrafted one. I first tried with Unity's own terrain system. It's a very impressive system, allowing you to paint textures, sculpt mountains and valleys, and place prefabs easily. I came across the same issue as before though, with applying the PS1 effects. I may come back to this approach again in the future, but at the moment I don't think it's a viable option to create what I want. All this experimenting led me to Blender, where I would create my terrain by hand. This terrain would go for a more blocky look, with everything being made in a sort of grid. I actually think this style best suits my PS1 aesthetic and more closely fits the level designs of games of that time as opposed to the other workflows I tried. I created a triplanar shader in ShaderGraph that also incorporated the PSX features to automatically texture the terrain mesh. This has it so a flat face will have the grass texture applied, while a face at an angle will have the stone texture applied. I added a skybox, lowering the resolution of the image to match the overall aesthetic. To decorate the scene, I started placing some of the prefabs I had prepared before, sticking to using oak and pine trees, as they are commonly found in Ireland. I also added in the water mesh and some rocks and bushes. I wasn't entirely happy with how the scene turned out, but accepted that this was the best I can do with my current experience with designing levels. To finish it all up and call it a devlog, I made prefabs of all the scene constants in my demo scene and brought them into my new level. Now I could run around as my character with a low resolution effect applied. Again, I'm not fully satisfied with this result, but I think it has potential. With this workflow, I think it might be possible to design different tile sets that when placed together can create a larger, open level big enough for the dragon to fly around in. After some post-processing, this is the final product. This soundscape you just heard was created by the talented Audio Hog Studios. If you need any audio effect for your own project, make sure to hit him up. This one was very difficult for me. Going into previous devlogs, I had a good idea of what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. With this one though, I went in a bit blind. I knew the look I wanted, but the process of getting there wasn't something I had done before. This is a learning experience and will no doubt come with many ups and downs. If you'd like to stick around for the ride, then please consider subscribing if you haven't already.